The cardboard boxes I had piled against my living room wall resembled tombstones, signifying the demise of my marriage. I sat on the floor, back against the cold radiator, clutching the final divorce decree in one hand and my phone in the other. The timestamp was 3:47 p.m., precisely 1 hour after Judge Morrison's gavel had been handed down and put an end to 22 years of what I had perceived as love. My phone vibrated, Rachel's name flashed on the screen, and despite better sense, I opened the message. "Hope you like your pathetic studio apartment. Nathan Brooks just installed his grand piano in your former music room. The movers informed us it's worth more than you earn in 5 years. Oh, and we're turning your practice studio into his cigar lounge. You know, for someone who really counts in this world." Another buzz. A photograph this time. Nathan standing in my home office, his Harvard diploma hanging where my granddad Walter's war medals were once proudly displayed. His smug face contorted into what he most likely assumed was a smile, but resembled more like a predator studying its prey. "You'll die poor and alone," the second text stated. "Like your grandfather. At least he could have his treasured secrets to keep him entertained in that nursing home. What do you have? A violin and illusions of greatness?" I was on the verge of hurling my phone against the wall, my arm already retracted when it rang. Not a text this time, but a real call. The caller ID caused me to freeze. Where the phone number ought to have been, there was only a string of zeros with one solitary one at the end. I glared at it for 3 rings, 4 rings, 5 on the 6th. My thumb involuntarily moved and answered. "Daniel Carter." The voice was male, crisp, military accurate. Every word spoken with a bullet being chambered. "Who is this?" My voice sounded harsher than I'd wanted, thick with the feelings I'd been holding down all day. "Mr. Carter, this is Colonel David Mitchell from the Pentagon's Estate Recovery Division. I need you to hear very carefully what I'm going to say. Your grandfather, Staff Sergeant Walter Carter, completed a secret military operation in Cambodia in 1964. That operation was named Night Music. My grandfather was a supply sergeant in Vietnam. He played the piano in the officers' clubs. Words spouted out automatically. The same tale my father Thomas told me 100 times. That was his cover, Mr. Carter. Your grandfather worked with the 5th Special Forces Group as a cryptography specialist. The operation he performed has been classified above top secret for precisely 60 years. At midnight last night, that classification lapsed. I got up slowly, my legs wobbly. What are you saying? Your grandfather picked up something in the Cambodian jungle. Something that has accrued long-standing value over the last 60 years. He never collected his compensation because of the secrecy surrounding the operation. That compensation, with interest and adjusted for inflation, is currently worth about $156 million. The telephone fell from my grasp. Clattering on the hardwood floor, I could hear the colonel's voice. Small and distant, still talking. I picked it up swiftly, my hands trembling. That's impossible. My grandfather passed away in a state-owned nursing home. My parents were forced to refinance their home just to cover the costs of his care. Staff Sergeant Carter made a decision. Mr. Carter, he chose silence to save his family and his country. But he also made arrangements. The funds can only be dispersed to his immediate heir, and only under certain conditions. What conditions? You must report to Washington at once. There's a Delta flight leaving O'Hare in 3 hours. A ticket was bought in your name, first class, window seat 14I. Your grandfather requested to include that detail in his file. How did you even know to call me today right after my divorce? There was a silence then. Your grandfather's instructions were very specific. Mr. Carter, we were to contact you on the day you lost everything. His exact words were, when my grandson has nothing left to lose, give him everything I couldn't claim. He's been dead 35 years, how could he possibly know? Walter Carter knew many things, Mr. Carter. He was very good at reading patterns. It's what made him priceless to military intelligence. The question is now whether you're prepared to learn what he knew. The clock began ticking the minute I placed this call. You have 72 hours to finish what your grandfather initiated, or the entire inheritance goes to the Department of Defense. And from where I sat, I could look out the window and see Lake Michigan, gray and churned up like my grandfather's eyes when he'd gaze at nothing. Lost in memories, he never spoke. I remembered Rachel's text. Dying poor and alone. I remembered Nathan's smug face in my home. Colonel Mitchell, what did my grandfather find in that jungle? The answer to that is worth $156 million. Mr. Carter, I'll meet you at the Pentagon tomorrow morning. 0800 hours sharp. Bring your grandfather's journal? The one with the musical compositions. You do still have it, don't you? I looked at the one box I'd refused to let Rachel touch during the divorce. The one labeled Grandpa Walter's things in my mother Linda's careful handwriting. Yes, I have it. Good, one more thing, Mr. Carter. Your ex-wife's new companion? Nathan Brooks, his grandfather, Charles Brooks, was a defense contractor in 1964. This is not a coincidence. Nothing about your current situation is a coincidence. Your grandfather foresaw this many decades ago. The phone went dead. I was in my bare apartment, among the wreckage of my broken marriage, holding a phone that had just linked me to a past I never knew existed. Outside, the Chicago skyline stretched toward a deepening sky, and somewhere in that labyrinth of glass and steel, my ex-wife was embracing her new existence in my former home, with a man whose family may be related to secrets my grandfather lost his life defending. I went to the box of Grandpa Walter's belongings and retrieved his leather journal, its yellowed pages covered with handwritten musical pieces that I'd performed on my violin from childhood. For the first time, I saw something I'd never noticed before. In the margin of the first page, written in pencil so faint that I had to hold it to the light, were 5 words. For Daniel, when all is over. 3 months before the phone call turned everything upside down, I stood on stage at Symphony Center, my violin singing the final notes of Brahms's Concerto in D major. The crowd exploded in applause, 2,000 people standing, and in the third row, Rachel sat with her hands idly still in her lap. She wasn't clapping. That ought to have been my first clue. Life at 47 had fallen into a rhythm as predictable as a metronome. I'd wake every morning at 6 Mile in our Lake Forest house, play scales in my soundproof studio while Rachel practiced yoga on the patio above the pool. The house spread over 2 acres of clipped perfection, each room a tribute to Rachel's taste and my financial ability to provide for her taste. We'd purchased it 15 years before when the Chicago Symphony gave me first chair violin, when Rachel still came to my performances and meant it when she said she loved the way my fingers glided over the strings. Your grandfather would be so proud, my mother Linda had spoken at our housewarming, tracing her creased hands over the marble countertops. Walter always said music would carry you somewhere he never could. Grandpa Walter had been deceased for 12 years by then, but his spirit remained in our family like a tune you can't quite recognize. My father Thomas kept his father's photo on the mantel, a black and white image of a young man in military dress, eyes sharp as winter. Next to it sat Walter's bronze star, though none of us knew what he'd done to earn it. He came back from Vietnam different, Thomas would say after his 3rd beer at family dinners. Spent 6 months in Cambodia before his official deployment even started, never talked about it, just played that piano like he was trying to drown out something he alone could hear. I'd inherited Walter's musical talent, but directed it differently, where he played jazz in smoky clubs, fingers flying over keys in improvisational brilliance. I'd found the structured world of classical music. Order, control, every note on paper, predetermined, safe. Rachel had adored that aspect of me when we'd met at a charity gala 23 years earlier. "You're not like these other men," she'd said that first night, her breath warm against my ear as we danced. "These hedge fund types who think money is music. You create something eternal." She was working for a small interior design firm then, hungry and ambitious, wearing a borrowed dress and fake pearls that I found endearing. I was 32, she was 29, and when she looked at me, I felt like Brahms himself. Our marriage had been good for the first decade. She redesigned our various apartments as my career grew, each space more complex than the previous one. When we finally purchased the Lake Forest house, she stopped working, said she wanted to take her time making our life beautiful. I rehearsed 6 hours a day, performed 3 nights a week, taught master classes at Northwestern on weekends. We talked about children but never quite got around to it. Always one more tour, one more renovation, one more something keeping us from that particular composition. The change began slowly, like a violin drifting out of harmony. Rachel joined the country club, began lunching with women whose husbands owned investment companies and tech firms. She'd return home discussing vacation homes in Aspen, yachts on Lake Geneva, private planes to Art Basel. "Did you know Nathan Brooks just purchased a Basquiat?" she said one night, not looking up from her phone. $23 million for a painting, Nathan Brooks, the name that would ultimately bring everything down. He'd hired Rachel to redo his Lincoln Park penthouse, a task she undertook without consulting me beforehand. "It's just one project," she'd told me. His money spends the same as anyone else's, but it didn't. His money came with admiring attention, compliments, and comparisons that made me feel smaller by the day. Nathan stood 6'2" to my 5'9", Harvard MBA to my Juilliard degree. He'd earned $40 million last year, while I'd scraped through $300,000. "Your husband's very successful," Nathan said at a dinner party we couldn't avoid, his hand resting just a moment too long on Rachel's shoulder. "It must be fascinating living with an artist." The way he said artist made it sound like a quaint hobby, something amusing but ultimately irrelevant. Rachel laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months, bright and genuine in a way that made my chest tighten. That was 6 months ago. The spring Vienna tour was supposed to be a triumph. 3 weeks touring with the Vienna Philharmonic. Instead, it became the backdrop for my marriage's last movement, while I performed Mozart in the Musikverein. Rachel played house in Nathan's penthouse, my nephew Ethan catching them in an embrace that would destroy everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the woman who'd once told me my music was all the wealth she'd ever need. The FaceTime call from Ethan arrived at 2 a.m. Vienna time. While I was going over sheet music in my hotel room at the Imperial, his face took up my phone screen, white and worried, looking younger than 23. "Uncle Dan, I have to say something." His voice broke like he was 13 again, calling me after his father's funeral. "I saw Aunt Rachel in Mr. Brooks's office building tonight. She's redesigning his office space, too," I said, putting down my violin. "She talked about extending the project." It was midnight. Uncle Dan. The entire building was dark except for the penthouse. They were on the balcony and they were, God, I don't know how to put this. They weren't gazing at fabric samples. The bow fell out of my fingers, clattering against the music stand. "What did you actually see?" "They were kissing, like really kissing. Her dress was. It wasn't fully on anymore, I'm so sorry. I took pictures because I didn't think you'd believe me otherwise." The pictures came seconds later. Rachel leaned against the glass railing. Nathan's fingers knotted in her hair, her red dress half open, the Chicago skyline sparkling behind them like a banner of my humiliation. The timestamp was 11:47 p.m. When she'd texted me she was going to bed early with a headache, I performed that night's performance flawlessly, mechanically. My fingers memorized the notes while my mind replayed those pictures. The Austrian critics described it as technically perfect but emotionally dead, which seemed appropriate for a man finding his life was a forgery. The showdown was 3 days after I got back to Chicago. Rachel was in the kitchen whistling Vivaldi's Spring, wearing diamond earrings I didn't recognize. "Nice earrings," I said, placing down my violin case with calculated calm. She touched them automatically. "Thank you. They were a gift from the Brooks project." Must be some project working late into the night. "Earning jewelry." Her face flashed through a set of expressions like movements in a symphony. Surprise, calculation, defiance, and ultimately cold determination. "You know, Ethan saw you. He works in Nathan's building, don't you remember? Or did you leave family behind while you were undressing for your client?" She put her coffee cup down on the counter. "I wasn't going to insult you by lying about it." "How kind of you. You want me to apologize? Okay. Sorry that you had to learn it this way. But I'm not sorry that it happened." She rose, smoothing her skirt with hands that used to map my face after shows. "Do you know what it's like to be married to a person who loves dead composers more than they love living humans? You spend 6 hours a day with your fiddle, Dan, 6 hours. Nathan spends those hours building empires. I am a musician. This is what I do. It's what you said you adored in me. I was 29. I thought passion for art translated to passion for life. But you don't live, Dan, you merely perform. Even our marriage became a recital. The same movements played over and over. Nathan teaches me new worlds. Last week we flew to Monaco for lunch. For lunch? When's the last time we went anywhere that wasn't for my work? So you wasted 22 years for lunch in Monaco? No, I threw it away on someone who makes me feel alive. You need to know the difference between you and Nathan. When he enters a room, folks notice when you enter. They may appreciate your skill, but no one fears you. No one needs you. No one's life changes because Daniel Carter lives. Except yours. My money changed your life pretty dramatically, she laughed, bitter and sharp. Your money? Dan, Nathan makes your yearly pay in a week. That house you're so proud of. His wine cellar is worth more. You're a museum piece. A relic playing relics for other relics. The world moved on. And you're still standing on stage playing music by men who've been dead for centuries. The divorce lawyer she'd hired was her father's golf partner. Naturally, Illinois law favored the non-working spouse, especially one who'd sacrificed her career for the marriage. The papers were filed before I'd even processed what was happening. She wanted half the retirement accounts, alimony that would cripple me, and maintenance of her established lifestyle. "You'll keep your violin," her lawyer said generously, "and one vehicle." "Mrs. Carter is being quite reasonable," my mother Linda cried when I told her. "That woman never deserved you." My father Thomas was more pragmatic. "Walter lost everything too, you know. Came back from the war to find his first wife had sold the family farm and vanished with another man. He rebuilt from scratch and died with nothing." "He died with dignity," I corrected. "Sometimes that's all a man can hold on to." The Pentagon building emerged from the Virginia countryside like a geometric giant, its limestone walls shining in the early morning light. I'd flown in on the red-eye from Chicago. My grandfather's journal swathed in a towel in my backpack. Too valuable to leave to checked baggage, the Uber driver, himself a veteran, whistled low when I gave him the address. "Pentagon in the morning, you military?" My grandfather was Staff Sergeant Walter Carter. Must have been special to earn you a Pentagon invitation, if only he knew. I'd read and reread Walter's journal during the flight, spotting connections I'd never seen before. The musical pieces weren't accidental. Each one was dated, and the dates aligned with military operations in Southeast Asia. But it was the margins that held secrets, small notations that resembled dynamic markings but didn't fit musical notation. Colonel David Mitchell greeted me at security, his uniform sharp enough to cut paper. He was younger than his voice implied, perhaps 50, with the sort of posture that made you correct your own spine. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter." His handshake was brief but firm. "First, I must assure myself of your identity beyond paperwork. Speak to me of your grandfather's piano." It was a 1947 Baldwin Spinet. Mahogany finish. He purchased it from a pawn shop in Raleigh after the war. There was a cigarette burn on middle C from the previous owner. What did he call his Sunday night performances at the Veterans Home? I smiled despite everything. "Church for the unchurched." He said music was the only religion that never lied. Mitchell nodded. "Follow me." We descended 3 levels underground, passing through security checkpoints that grew progressively more serious. Finally, we entered a vault-like room with no windows, just fluorescent lights and a metal table holding several file boxes. "Your grandfather's real service record," Mitchell said, opening the first box. "What you're about to learn has been classified beyond top secret, even now. Certain details must remain redacted." The photographs showed Walter, young and sharp-eyed in jungle fatigues, standing with a unit of men whose faces were blacked out. Behind them, the wreckage of what looked like a small aircraft. Operation Night Music, February 1964. Your grandfather's unit was inserted into Cambodia to look for a crashed Soviet spy plane. Officially, there were no Soviets in Cambodia. Officially, we weren't there either. What did they discover? The plane was equipped with an early computer system, a prototype for coding nuclear launch procedures. But that wasn't the actual bonus. Viktor Klov, the pilot, survived the crash. He was dying, but alert. Your grandfather could converse with him in some Russian. Mitchell pulled out a transcript. Top secret, heavily redacted but still legible in places. Klov knew he was going to die. He provided your grandfather with data on Swiss bank accounts for paying double agents. Account numbers, passwords, the whole shebang. He pulled out a second photo. Walter with what appeared to be a metal briefcase. Your grandfather memorized it all before handing over the briefcase to command. He knew those account numbers. Could have taken that money any time. $22 million in 1964. Imagine what that's worth today. Why didn't he? Because it would have revealed the operation. Lives would have been lost. Silence was the option chosen by your grandfather, but he recorded it all in code embedded in his music. The Pentagon had an obligation to pay him for the mission, but he never collected. Said it would raise too many questions, endanger his family. And now the classification statute of limitations has run out. The payment stands at $156 million, but your grandfather set conditions. Mitchell handed me a sealed envelope, my name written in Walter's shaky handwriting. He left instructions that this could only be opened by his grandson, and only when that grandson had lost everything material and could gain everything essential. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, Walter's handwriting filled 3 pages. "Daniel, if you're reading this, your marriage has ended, and you've lost your worldly possessions. I know this because patterns repeat through generations. And I saw your father's romantic soul in you. You love wholeheartedly, so you can be hurt wholeheartedly. The music I left carries more than notes. Each piece plots to coordinates. Each rhythm shift is a number sequence. In Baltimore Storage Unit 447, paid up through 2087, you'll discover what I couldn't destroy and couldn't take. The Pentagon funds are yours no matter. But taking what's in Baltimore means opting for truth over ease. The Swiss accounts still remain, the money scrubbed by time, but dirty in origin, names are applied. Powerful families who constructed fortunes on war gains. One name will be important to you personally by the time you read this. You have 72 hours from the time Mitchell called you. If you do not claim it, everything falls to defense. If you do, you'll have the authority to right historical wrongs or maintain historical deceits. Decide wisely. Music, like truth, resounds across time. Your grandfather, Walter. The storage warehouse in Baltimore resembled a place left behind, its red brick face smeared with years of dirt and graffiti. But the keypad outside functioned flawlessly when I entered the code contained in the third movement of Walter's Autumn Fugue. 19640-228, the mission date and his service number. Unit 447 lay at the end of a long, rust and paper-scented hallway. The lock turned smoothly despite its age, and within, a single filing cabinet stood against the wall, military green and ordinary. On top of it was a chess set, its pieces arranged mid-game, and I knew the position at once. It was the Budapest Gambit, the same opening Walter had taught me when I was 8. The gambit is sacrifice, he'd explained. You sacrifice material to gain position. In the cabinet's top drawer was another safety deposit box key, this one for Baltimore First National, and below it, a leather portfolio filled with papers that made my hands tremble. Photocopies of Swiss bank statements from 1964 to 1970, documenting payments from American defense contractors to Soviet agents of intelligence. The figures were astronomical, but the names were worse. Brooks Industries was listed 17 times. Charles Brooks, Nathan's grandfather, had sold faulty helicopter components to the Army while financing Soviet activities in Cambodia. American troops had died in crashes caused by mechanical failure that Brooks knew about and ignored. The profit margin on those defective parts, 43%. The blood money in Swiss accounts, $22 million. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Carter. The voice was familiar but wrong. This is Nathan Brooks. I understand you've been to Washington. How do you know that? The same way I knew your wife was vulnerable to someone who could offer her more. The same way my family has always known about Walter Carter and what he made off with in that jungle. We've been monitoring your family for 60 years. Waiting for someone to claim something that does not belong to them. Your grandfather was a war profiteer who killed American soldiers. My grandfather was a businessman who realized war is just another market. Your grandfather was a thief who stole evidence that belonged to the government. He recorded the truth. Truth is what powerful people choose it to be. Carter, here's my proposal. Take the Pentagon cash and fade away. Leave Baltimore immediately. Leave those papers where they are. And you'll be wealthy enough to never hear Rachel's or my name again. Or go down this road and find out what true loss tastes like. You're trying to intimidate me. I'm offering you the same alternative your grandfather had. Silence and protection or honesty and repercussions. He chose silence, be wiser than he was. The phone went dead. I remained in that storage unit, gripping proof of crimes that had amassed one of America's great fortunes and subsidized my destruction. I phoned Brian, my cousin, the investigative reporter. Brian, clear your calendar. I have the story that will cement your reputation. The safety deposit box at Baltimore First National Bank vault opened with ceremonial slowness. The box was bigger than I had anticipated, and in it were the originals of everything in the storage unit, along with something more. Reel-to-reel tapes marked Clove Confession, and a second set of books showing where the Swiss cash ended up after 1970. Nathan's dad had inherited the accounts, then Nathan in 2010, but Walter had left one final surprise at the bottom of the box, a single sheet of music handwritten, headed Redemption Suite. When I hummed the melody, I knew it was a musical encryption of account passwords. My grandfather hadn't just recorded the crimes. He'd kept access to the cash. I spent the next 24 hours with Brian and a group of forensic accountants his paper hired. The Swiss banks verified the accounts were active and genuine. The balance at present in all the accounts, $87 million clean money now, technically, but founded on bones. We go to press tomorrow, Brian explained. This will ruin Brooks Industries and Rachel indirectly. She's bet her future on Nathan's second thoughts. I considered Walter's silence to safeguard his family. Then I considered the names on those casualty lists. Young men who perished because Charles Brooks opted for profit over lives. No second thoughts, but we do this clever. We release the historical records first. Let the public draw the dots to the present, and the Swiss funds don't go to me. They go to a trust for families of soldiers who perished in helicopter accidents between 1964 and 1970. All of it, every penny. I'll have the Pentagon compensation. That's more than I ever imagined. The blood money goes back to the families it had been taken from. Brian grinned. Your grandfather would be proud, perhaps. Or perhaps he'd consider me a fool to have opted for truth over safety. What do you think he'd do? I glanced over the sheet music again, at Walter's meticulous markings. His meticulous recording of atrocities he couldn't stop but never would forget. I believe he'd say that the music was worth performing, even if the audience wasn't yet prepared to hear it. The Washington Post published Brian's story Tuesday morning with the headline, Blood Money: How Defense Contractor Fraud Funded Enemy Operations in Vietnam, at noon. Brooks Industries stock plummeted 40% at close of markets. Nathan Brooks was under federal investigation for inherited fraud and tax evasion of unreported Swiss accounts. I saw the news from my new office, a converted brownstone in Lincoln Park, where I'd set up the Walter Carter Foundation for veterans' families. The Pentagon money had cleared the previous week, all $156 million clean and legal, and mine, but I couldn't get out of my head those helicopter crash stories. The faces of 19-year-old soldiers who never returned because someone determined their lives weren't worth more than profit margins. Rachel called 17 times that first day. I returned her call on the 18th. Dan, Nathan's been arrested. The FBI took everything. The house, the accounts, even my car, because it was purchased with what they're referring to as proceeds of criminal enterprise. I have nothing. You have what you selected. I apologize, I made an error. I realize now Nathan manipulated me the same as his grandfather manipulated those men. I'm living with my sister in Naperville. In her basement, me in a basement in Naperville. Rachel, what do you need from me? I wish to return home. That house is no longer my home. The bank repossessed it after Nathan's assets were seized. And you weren't able to make the payments. I purchased it at auction last month. You purchased our home? I purchased a home. My Aunt Margaret and Uncle Richard reside there currently. They lost their home due to medical expenses, and now they have something lovely to spend the rest of their years. Appears to be a more suitable purpose for the property than Nathan's cigar bar. She was sobbing now, tragic sobs that once would have shattered me. What am I to do? The same thing I did. Begin again. The difference is you got to pick your ending. Mine was picked for me. 6 months later, I played at Symphony Center once more, debuting my work, Redemption Suite. The work Walter had composed but never played publicly. The crowd had no idea they were listening to coded Swiss bank passwords turned into melody. Tragedy turned to music. My mother Linda was in the front row, tears running down her face when they played the Adagio movement that had the names of all the soldiers who perished in a Brooks-provided helicopter. The trust fund I'd set up had already disbursed $12 million to Gold Star families. Brian won a Pulitzer for his reporting. Brooks Industries went bankrupt after the lawsuits began. Nathan received 7 years in federal prison for tax evasion, the only crime they could make stick of inherited offenses. Rachel wed her divorce attorney 2 years down the line, a pragmatic move that likely suited her better than marrying for love ever had. My sister Sarah asked me once if I regretted any of it. Which part? Exposing Nathan or losing Rachel? Both either. You could have taken it all and stayed quiet. Walter did. Walter didn't have a choice. The world wasn't ready to hear the truth in 1964. He kept those secrets like seeds, waiting for the right season to plant them. I just happened to be the gardener who inherited his soil. The real inheritance wasn't the money, though that changed everything in practical ways. It was understanding that Walter's silence hadn't been weakness, but strategy. He'd played a longer game than anyone realized, setting up the board so that 60 years later, his grandson could make the moves he couldn't. I still live modestly. A 2-bedroom condo walking distance from Symphony Hall. I still practice 6 hours a day. But now I also teach free music lessons to veterans' kids every weekend. The foundation has expanded to include music therapy programs at VA hospitals. using Walter's compositions to help soldiers process trauma he'd understood but couldn't discuss. Sometimes I play in nursing homes like Walter did, and I always end with Moonlight Serenade in his modified rhythm. Most people don't notice the Morse code embedded in the melody, but occasionally an old veteran will look up sharply, recognizing the pattern. Night music, one whispered to me once. You know about night music, my grandfather knew. I explained to him. He ensured that someone would remember. The reality of inheritance is that it's never actually about money. It's about the narratives we bear, the decisions we make with what we have, and the courage to play the challenging passages even if our fingers tremble. Walter left me more than millions. He left me evidence that diligent justice may take 60 years, but it does come inscribed in the beat of time itself, waiting for someone to finally play the right notes in the right order at the right time. And that time, it appears, was worth all the things I lost trying to find it. If you liked this story, please like the video and share it with someone who enjoys stories of justice and family secrets. Comment below if you've ever learned something surprising about your family's history. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth emerging from the shadows.